Captain Marcus Thornfield stood at his post outside the Grand Palace gates, his polished armor gleaming under the afternoon sun. For 15 years, he had served the royal family with unwavering loyalty, following every rule and protocol without question. His reputation was built on discipline, order, and an iron will that never bent, not even for the smallest favor. The palace courtyard bustled with activity as merchants, nobles, and servants moved about their daily business. Marcus watched everything with eagle eyes, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Nothing escaped his attention. Every face was memorized, every movement catalogued. This was his duty, his purpose, his entire existence. As the church bells chimed 3 o'clock, Marcus noticed something unusual near the ornate fountain at the center of the courtyard. A small figure sat hunched on the marble edge, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. It was a boy, no more than 7 years old, with tousled brown hair and clothes that spoke of a middle-class family. His face was streaked with tears, and his small hands clutched a wooden toy horse. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he forced himself to look away. The rules were clear: royal guards were not to leave their posts for any reason during their shift. Personal matters, civilian problems, even emergencies were to be handled by others. His job was to protect the palace, not to solve every problem that wandered into the courtyard. But the boy's crying grew louder, more desperate. Other people passed by, some glancing with sympathy, others completely ignoring the child's distress. Marcus found his gaze drawn back to the small figure repeatedly. The boy looked so lost, so frightened, calling out "Mama" in a voice that cracked with fear. A palace servant approached the boy briefly, asking a few questions before shrugging and walking away. A nobleman's wife paused, looked annoyed by the noise, and hurried past with her nose in the air. Even a priest simply blessed the child from a distance and continued on his way. Marcus's jaw clenched. He had been an orphan himself once, left at a monastery door with nothing but a torn blanket. He remembered the crushing loneliness, the fear that no one would ever come for him. The memory was like a dagger to his heart, but he pushed it down. Emotions had no place in his duty. The captain of the guard, Sir Aldrich, emerged from the palace and approached Marcus's position. "Thornfield," he said in his gruff voice, "there's been a report of suspicious activity near the east wing. I need you to investigate immediately." Marcus saluted sharply. "Yes, sir." But, as he prepared to leave his post, he glanced once more at the crying boy. The child had now stood up and was wandering closer to the palace steps, calling for his mother with increasing panic. "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "there's a lost child in the courtyard." "Perhaps someone should, not our concern," Aldrich cut him off. "The city guards can handle civilian matters." "You have your orders." Marcus nodded stiffly and began to move toward the east wing. But, with each step, the boy's cries seemed to echo louder in his ears. He had always prided himself on following orders without question, on being the perfect soldier. Rules existed for good reasons. They maintained order, prevented chaos, ensured that duty came before personal feelings. Yet something deep inside him rebelled as he heard the child call out again, "Mama, where are you? I'm scared." The investigation at the East Wing revealed nothing more than a cat that had knocked over some gardening tools. As Marcus returned to his post, he saw that the boy was still there, now sitting on the steps leading to the palace entrance. The child's sobs had quieted to exhausted whimpers, and he rocked back and forth, holding his toy horse tight against his chest. Marcus resumed his position, standing perfectly still, his expression carved from stone. But, inside, a war raged between his sense of duty and something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Compassion. The very thing he had trained himself to suppress was now threatening to tear him apart. The sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Most of the day's visitors had departed, leaving the area quieter. The boy remained on the steps, no longer crying but staring blankly ahead with eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. A group of palace guards passed by on their way to the evening meal. One of them, a young man named Thomas, paused near Marcus. "That child has been there for hours," he whispered. "Shouldn't someone help him?" "Orders are orders," Marcus replied curtly, though his voice sounded strained even to his own ears. Thomas looked at him with surprise. Marcus was known for his strictness, but also for his fairness. This cold dismissal seemed unlike him. The younger guard shrugged and continued on, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the increasingly heavy weight of his conscience. As darkness began to fall, the boy's situation became more desperate. The temperature was dropping, and he had no coat. Palace staff lit torches around the courtyard, but they did nothing to warm the child who sat shivering on the cold stone steps. Marcus had faced enemy soldiers without flinching. He had stood guard through storms, illnesses, and personal tragedies without abandoning his post. But watching this helpless child suffer was testing him in ways he had never imagined possible. The boy suddenly stood up and began walking toward the palace gates, calling out weakly for his mother. He stumbled, exhaustion finally taking its toll, and fell to his knees near Marcus's post. The wooden horse flew from his grasp and skittered across the cobblestones. Marcus looked down at the child, who was now so close he could see the tear tracks on his dirty cheeks. The boy looked up at him with hope in his eyes. "Please, sir," the child whispered, "have you seen my mama? We got separated at the market, and I don't know how to get home." For a moment, Marcus's resolve wavered. His hand moved slightly, as if to reach down and help the boy up. But then, he caught sight of Sir Aldrich watching from a palace window, and he forced himself to remain motionless. "I cannot leave my post," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. The boy's face crumpled in disappointment. He retrieved his toy horse and wandered away from the gates, looking smaller and more lost than ever. Marcus stood in the growing darkness, his armor feeling heavier than ever before. He had always believed that duty was the highest virtue, that following orders without question was the mark of a true soldier. But tonight, for the first time in his career, he wondered if there was something more important than rules and regulations. The boy found a spot near a pillar and curled up on the ground, using his toy horse as a pillow. Marcus watched him shiver in the cold night air, and something inside the captain's chest felt like it was breaking. As the night watch prepared to take over, Marcus realized he faced a choice that would define not just this moment, but the man he truly was beneath all the armor and protocol. The boy needed help, and everyone else had walked away. The question was, would he do the same? The wooden horse caught the torchlight as the child shifted in his sleep, and Marcus remembered his own toy, a small carved bird that had been his only possession at the monastery. It had been his comfort, his friend, his connection to hope when everything else seemed lost. Standing there in his gleaming armor, Captain Marcus Thornfield began to understand that some things mattered more than rules, and that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to set aside the very laws that had shaped your entire life. The first rays of dawn painted the palace courtyard in soft golden hues, but Captain Marcus Thornfield had not moved from his post all night. His muscles ached from standing motionless for hours, yet his eyes had never left the small figure curled up near the pillar. The boy had barely slept, whimpering occasionally in the cold, clutching his wooden horse like a lifeline. As the morning shift arrived, Marcus's replacement, Lieutenant Hayes, approached with a puzzled expression. "Captain, your shift ended hours ago. Why are you still here?" Marcus struggled to find an answer that wouldn't reveal the turmoil in his heart. "Ensuring proper security transition," he said finally, his voice hoarse from the night's silent vigil. Hayes looked toward the sleeping child and shook his head. "Poor little thing. Been there all night, has he? Someone should contact the city authorities." "Yes," Marcus agreed, though he made no move to leave. "Someone should." As Hayes settled into position, Marcus finally stepped away from his post. But, instead of heading to the barracks as expected, he found himself walking slowly toward the pillar where the boy lay. Each step felt like a betrayal of everything he had been taught, yet he could not stop himself. The child stirred as Marcus's shadow fell across him. Brown eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and dried tears, looked up at the towering figure in armor. The boy scrambled to his feet, hope flickering across his small face. "Please, sir," the child said, his voice barely a whisper, "I just want to find my mama." Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. The action felt foreign, almost forbidden. In 15 years of service, he had never knelt before anyone except the royal family. But something about this child's courage, his refusal to give up despite a night of abandonment, stirred something deep within the captain's heart. "What is your name, boy?" Marcus asked gently. "William," the child replied, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "William Baker. My mama sells bread at the market. We were shopping for herbs when I saw a puppet show. When I looked back, she was gone." Marcus studied the boy's face, noting the honesty in his eyes, the way he spoke of his mother with such love and trust. This was no street orphan or runaway. This was a child who had simply made a mistake and was now paying a terrible price for it. "William Baker," Marcus repeated slowly. "That's a strong name." The boy's face brightened slightly. "Mama says I'm named after a great king." "She's right," Marcus said, surprised by the warmth in his own voice. "Tell me about your mother. What does she look like?" William's eyes lit up as he described his mother, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, who sang while she worked and always saved the best pieces of bread for him. As the boy spoke, Marcus felt his resolve crystallizing. This child belonged with his family, not abandoned in a palace courtyard while adults walked past and officials debated procedures. "Sir," William asked hesitantly, "could you help me find her? I promise I won't be any trouble." Marcus looked around the courtyard, now bustling with early morning activity. Palace servants hurried about their duties, nobles began arriving for court sessions, and guards marched past in formation. All of them had places to be, people to serve, duties to fulfill. Just as he did. But, as he looked back at William's hopeful face, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. "Yes," he said quietly. "I will help you." The words felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Marcus had never defied direct orders, never put personal feelings before duty. Yet here he was, making a promise to a lost child that would require him to abandon everything he had been taught about proper protocol. William's face broke into the first smile Marcus had seen from him, transforming the boy's tired features completely. "Really? You'll help me find Mama?" "I give you my word," Marcus said solemnly. "But first, you need food and water. When did you last eat?" William's stomach answered with a loud rumble, and he blushed. "Yesterday morning. Mama packed honey cakes for the market trip." Marcus felt anger surge through him, not at the boy, but at himself and every other adult who had passed by this hungry child without offering help. He stood up, his decision made. "Come with me, William. We're going to get you fed, and then, we're going to find your mother." The palace kitchens were already busy preparing the morning meal when Marcus appeared in the doorway with William at his side. The head cook, a plump woman named Martha who had known Marcus since his early days as a guard, looked up in surprise. "Captain Thornfield? What brings you to my kitchen at this hour? And who might this young gentleman be?" "This is William," Marcus said simply. "He's been lost since yesterday and needs a proper meal." Martha's maternal instincts kicked in immediately. She bustled over to William, clucking with concern as she noticed his pale complexion and the way his clothes hung loose on his small frame. "Lost since yesterday? And no one thought to feed the poor lamb?" She shot an accusatory look at Marcus, who had the grace to look ashamed. "Well, we'll fix that right away. Sit yourself down, young William, and Martha will take care of you." As William devoured fresh bread, eggs, and warm milk, Marcus found himself studying the boy's mannerisms. The child ate with careful politeness despite his obvious hunger, thanking Martha repeatedly and trying not to spill anything. He had been raised well, with love and proper values. This only strengthened Marcus's resolve to reunite him with his family. "Now then," Martha said to Marcus as William finished his meal, "what's this really about? You've never brought anyone to my kitchen before, not in all the years I've known you." Marcus hesitated. Martha had always been kind to him, treating him like the son she'd never had. If he was going to break the rules, he needed allies who understood why. "The boy was abandoned in the courtyard all night," he said quietly. "Everyone ignored him, following procedure while a child suffered. I can't stand by and watch anymore." Martha nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And you're planning to help him find his family, regardless of what your superiors might say?" "Yes. Good, Martha said firmly. It's about time you remembered there's more to life than following orders blindly. That boy needs help, and you're the first person with enough courage to give it to him. She packed a small bag of food for their journey and pressed it into Marcus's hands. For the road, she said with a wink. And, Captain? Your secret is safe with me. As they prepared to leave the kitchen, William tugged at Marcus's cape. Sir, are you sure this is allowed? I don't want you to get in trouble because of me. The innocent concern in the boy's voice nearly broke Marcus's heart. Here was a child worried about the welfare of a stranger, even after being abandoned and ignored by countless adults. Don't worry about me, William, Marcus said gently. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking a few rules. They made their way toward the palace gates, moving carefully to avoid drawing attention. Marcus had changed out of his ceremonial armor into simpler guard attire, hoping to blend in better. As they approached the main entrance, he saw Lieutenant Hayes still at his post. Hayes spotted them and frowned. Captain? I thought you had gone to rest. And why do you have the boy with you? Marcus's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. Taking care of a security matter. The child may have information about suspicious activities in the market district. It was a lie, but one that served a greater truth. Hayes nodded, accepting the explanation without question. Marcus's reputation for thorough investigation worked in his favor. As they passed through the gates and into the city streets beyond, Marcus felt a strange sensation wash over him. For the first time in 15 years, he was leaving his post not because of orders, but because of choice. The feeling was both liberating and terrifying. William stayed close to his side, occasionally pointing out landmarks he remembered from his journey to the palace. I think we came this way, he would say, or that fountain looks familiar. Each small recognition brought them closer to their goal and filled Marcus with an unfamiliar sense of purpose. The market district was already alive with activity when they arrived. Vendors called out their wares, customers haggled over prices, and the air filled with the sense of fresh bread, spices, and flowers. Marcus had rarely visited this part of the city during his duties, and he found himself overwhelmed by the vibrant life that existed beyond the palace walls. William's excitement grew as they walked through the familiar streets. This is it, he exclaimed, pointing toward a section where food vendors had set up their stalls. Mama's stand is over there. But, as they approached the area William indicated, Marcus's heart sank. The bread vendor's stall stood empty, its tables cleared and its awning pulled down. A neighboring vendor noticed their disappointed faces and called out to them. Looking for the baker woman? She's not been here since yesterday. Heard she was searching the city for her lost boy. Poor thing was beside herself with worry. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. While he had stood at his post following orders, a mother had been searching desperately for her missing child. The rules he had honored had prevented him from helping when help was needed most. But there was still hope. If William's mother was searching for him, they could find her. It would just take more time, more effort, and more courage than Marcus had initially imagined. Don't worry, he told William, seeing the disappointment in the boy's eyes. We'll find her. I promise. And, for the first time in his life, Captain Marcus Thornfield understood that some promises were worth breaking every rule to keep. The search for William's mother led Marcus and the boy through winding streets and crowded alleys that he had never explored during his years of palace service. Each vendor they questioned, each concerned citizen who offered help, revealed a world of ordinary kindness that existed far from the rigid protocols of royal duty. She was here this morning, said an elderly flower seller, her weathered hands gentle as she touched William's cheek. Poor dear was crying something fierce, asking everyone if they'd seen her little boy. Described you perfectly, she did, down to that wooden horse you're carrying. William's grip on his toy tightened. Which way did she go? The woman pointed toward the cathedral district. Said she was going to check with the priests. Sometimes lost children find their way to the church, you know. As they walked through the city, Marcus began to notice things he had never seen before. The way merchants looked out for each other's children while parents conducted business. The kindness of strangers who offered directions or water without expecting payment. The networks of care and community that existed without official oversight or royal decree. "Sir Marcus," William said as they paused near a fountain, "why did you decide to help me?" The other guards just walked past. The question struck Marcus like a physical blow. He stopped walking and knelt down beside the boy, struggling to find words for feelings he had spent decades suppressing. "Because," Marcus said slowly, "sometimes following your heart is more important than following orders. And my heart told me that you needed help. But won't you get in trouble?" Marcus looked at William's concerned face and felt something shift inside him permanently. "Maybe. But some things are worth the risk." They continued toward the cathedral, passing through neighborhoods where Marcus had never set foot. In one plaza, they encountered a group of city guards who recognized Marcus's uniform despite his attempt to dress down. "Captain Thornfield," one of them called out. "What brings a royal guard to our district?" Marcus tensed, but William stepped forward before he could speak. "He's helping me find my mama," the boy said with complete trust. "She's been looking for me since yesterday." The city guard's expression softened. "Ah, you must be the baker boy. We've had reports of a woman searching frantically. Your mother passed through here about an hour ago, heading toward St. Catherine's Church." Relief flooded through Marcus, but it was mixed with guilt. The city guards had been aware of the situation and were actively helping, while he had spent the night standing uselessly at his post. The realization that he could have prevented so much suffering weighed heavily on his conscience. St. Catherine's Church stood at the heart of the old city, its stone spires reaching toward heaven like praying hands. As they approached the heavy wooden doors, Marcus heard a sound that made his blood run cold, the desperate sobbing of a woman in distress. "Mama!" William cried, recognizing the voice instantly. They rushed through the church doors and found her kneeling before the altar, her shoulders shaking with exhausted grief. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably no more than 30, with brown hair that had escaped its braid and a simple dress stained with tears and dust from her frantic search. "Please," she was praying aloud, "please let me find my boy. He's all I have in this world. I can't lose him. I can't. Mama!" William's voice echoed through the cathedral like a bell of joy. The woman's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face transforming as she saw her son running down the aisle toward her. "William! Oh, my precious boy!" She caught him in her arms and held him so tightly that Marcus feared she might never let go. Both mother and son were crying now, but these were tears of relief and overwhelming love. Marcus found himself stepping back, feeling like an intruder on this sacred moment of reunion. "I looked everywhere," she whispered into William's hair. "Everywhere. I thought I'd lost you forever. I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted to watch the puppet show, and when I turned around, you were gone. I was so scared. Shoo, my love. You're safe now. That's all that matters." Marcus watched from the shadows near the church entrance, his heart full of emotions he had no names for. He had expected to feel satisfaction at completing his mission, but instead he felt something deeper, a profound sense of rightness, as if this moment was what his entire life had been leading toward. After several minutes, William remembered his rescuer and turned toward the back of the church. "Mama, this is Sir Marcus. He's the one who helped me find you." The woman looked up, and Marcus saw her clearly for the first time. Her eyes were the same warm brown as William's, but they held depths of strength and kindness that spoke of a life devoted to love and sacrifice. When she smiled at him through her tears, Marcus felt something inside his chest crack open. "Sir, how can I ever thank you?" she said, rising to her feet while keeping one arm around William. "You brought my son back to me." Marcus stepped forward awkwardly, and used to such raw gratitude. "No thanks are necessary, madam. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they didn't," she said quietly. "William told me he spent the night alone in the palace courtyard while people passed by. You were the only one who stopped to help." The accusation in her words was gentle but clear, and Marcus felt its weight. He had not been the only one to pass by. He had been the only one to eventually act, and that had happened far too late. "I should have helped sooner," he admitted. "I was bound by duty." "But that's no excuse for allowing a child to suffer." She studied his face, seeming to see past the armor and protocol to the man beneath. "What matters is that you helped at all. In my experience, courage isn't about never being afraid or never making mistakes. It's about doing the right thing even when it's difficult." William tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "Will you come have dinner with us? Mama makes the best stew in the whole kingdom, and I want to show you my room and my other toys." The innocent invitation pierced Marcus's heart. When was the last time someone had invited him for a simple meal, not because of his rank or position, but because they genuinely wanted his company? He couldn't remember. I should return to the palace," he said, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. "My absence will be noticed." William's face fell. "But I thought we were friends now." "We are," Marcus said quickly, surprised by how much he meant it. "We absolutely are, William." "Then, you'll come?" the boy asked hopefully. "Friends visit each other, don't they?" Marcus looked at the boy's expectant face, then at his mother's gentle smile of invitation. For years, he had eaten alone in the barracks, surrounded by fellow guards who respected him but never truly knew him. The prospect of sharing a meal with people who actually wanted his presence was both terrifying and wonderful. "Perhaps." He began, then stopped himself. What was he thinking? He was already in enough trouble for abandoning his post. Socializing with civilians would only make things worse. But, as he looked at this small family, this mother and son who had already endured so much separation, Marcus realized that he was tired of living a life dictated entirely by other people's rules. "Yes," he said firmly. "I would be honored to join you for dinner." The walk to the Baker cottage took them through the craftsman's quarter, where modest homes lined cobblestone streets. William chattered excitedly the entire way, telling his mother about Marcus's kindness, about the palace kitchens, about their search through the city. His energy and joy were infectious, and Marcus found himself smiling more in one afternoon than he had in months. The cottage was small but immaculately kept, with flower boxes beneath the windows and herbs growing in a tiny garden by the door. Inside, the main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a stone hearth, a simple wooden table, and shelves lined with jars of spices and preserved foods. "Please, sit," William's mother said, gesturing to a chair by the fire. "I'm Anne, by the way. Anne Baker. I don't think I properly introduced myself in the church." "Marcus Thornfield," he replied, settling carefully into the chair. The furniture was sturdy but clearly made for normal-sized people, not armored guards. As Anne began preparing their meal, Marcus watched her work with the same efficiency and care he had observed in the palace kitchens, but with a warmth and love that transformed every gesture. William helped by setting the table and chattering about his adventures, his fear from the previous night already fading into an exciting story. "You know," Anne said as she stirred the pot hanging over the fire, "William talks about becoming a guard someday. Says he wants to be brave and strong and help people." Marcus looked at the boy, who beamed with pride. "Is that so?" "Yes. But I want to be the kind of guard who helps everyone, not just important people. Like you did with me." The simple statement hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. In his 15 years of service, he had protected royalty, defended the palace, and maintained order. But when had he last helped someone who truly needed it? When had he last used his strength and training to make life better for ordinary people? "That's a noble goal, William," Marcus said seriously. "The world needs more guards like that." As they sat down to eat, Anne offered a simple prayer of thanks, for William's safety, for Marcus's kindness, and for their family being whole again. Marcus bowed his head, feeling strangely moved by the ritual. In the palace, meals were functional affairs, taken quickly between duties. Here, even a simple dinner felt like a celebration. The stew was indeed excellent, rich and hearty with vegetables from Anne's garden and bread she had baked that morning. But, more than the food, Marcus treasured the conversation, William's excited stories, Anne's gentle questions about his life, the feeling of being welcomed not as Captain Thornfield but simply as Marcus. As evening approached, Marcus knew he could delay no longer. Sir Aldrich would have noticed his absence by now, and there would be consequences. But, as he prepared to leave this warm cottage and return to the cold stone walls of his duty, he realized that something fundamental had changed. "Thank you," he said to Anne as she walked him to the door. "For the meal, for the welcome, for helping me remember what I'm supposed to be protecting." She smiled, her hand resting on William's shoulder. "Thank you for teaching my son that there are still good people in the world who will help when help is needed." As Marcus walked back toward the palace, William's words echoed in his mind, "I want to be the kind of guard who helps everyone, not just important people." The boy had unknowingly identified the very thing that Marcus had lost somewhere along the way, the understanding that true service meant protecting all people, not just those who lived behind palace walls. By the time Marcus reached the palace gates, he had made another decision that would change his life forever. But, this time, he was no longer afraid of the consequences. The confrontation Marcus had been dreading came swiftly. No sooner had he passed through the palace gates than Sir Aldrich appeared, his face dark with anger and his hand resting meaningfully on his sword hilt. "Captain Thornfield," Aldrich's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "My office. Now." Marcus followed his superior through the corridors he had walked countless times before, but everything felt different now. The marble floors seemed colder, the tapestries more distant, the very air heavy with the weight of protocols and traditions that had once been his entire world. Aldrich's office was sparse and functional, decorated only with weapons and commendations that spoke of a life devoted entirely to military service. The older man settled behind his desk and fixed Marcus with a stare that had intimidated countless subordinates over the years. "Abandoning your post. Disobeying direct orders. Consorting with civilians during duty hours." Aldrich's voice was measured, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. "In my 30 years of service, I have never witnessed such a complete breakdown of discipline from a captain of the Royal Guard." Marcus stood at attention, his eyes fixed on a point above Aldrich's head. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain?" Aldrich slammed his hand on the desk, making the inkwell jump. "What explanation could possibly justify abandoning the sacred trust placed in you by His Majesty? You swore an oath, Thornfield. Duty above all else. The crown before personal feelings. Have you forgotten every principle we stand for?" "No, sir. I remember my oath perfectly." "Then, how do you justify your actions?" For a moment, Marcus wavered. The old instincts ran deep, urging him to apologize, to beg forgiveness, to promise never to stray from orders again. But, then, he thought of William's tear-streaked face, of Anne's grateful smile, of the warmth he had felt sitting at their simple table. "Because," Marcus said quietly, "sometimes our duty to protect people conflicts with our duty to follow orders. And, when that happens, I believe we must choose to protect." Aldrich's eyes widened in shock. In all their years of service together, Marcus had never questioned authority, never challenged the chain of command. "You believe?" Aldrich's voice rose. "Your beliefs are irrelevant, Captain. You follow orders. That is what separates us from common mercenaries." "Is it?" Marcus met his superior's gaze directly for the first time. "Because yesterday, while I followed orders, a 7-year-old boy spent the night alone and terrified in our courtyard. While I maintained my post, his mother searched the city in desperate anguish. Common mercenaries might have ignored his suffering, but I like to think that true guardians of the realm would have acted with compassion." "Compassion?" Aldrich spat. "Compassion is a luxury we cannot afford. If every guard abandoned his post to help every crying child, who would protect the palace? Who would maintain order? You think your feelings matter more than the security of the kingdom?" Marcus had heard these arguments countless times, had even made them himself when training younger guards. But, now they rang hollow, empty words that ignored the fundamental reason why the palace needed protecting in the first place. "With respect, sir, what is the point of protecting a kingdom if we forget why it's worth protecting? If we become so focused on following rules that we lose sight of the people those rules are meant to serve?" Aldrich stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. "You're talking like a philosopher, not a soldier. The people we serve are the royal family, not every beggar and orphan who wanders into our courtyard." "William Baker is not a beggar or an orphan," Marcus said firmly. "He's the son of an honest woman who contributes to our kingdom every day. His mother bakes bread that feeds dozens of families. They pay taxes that fund our salaries. They are exactly the people we should be protecting." "Even if that were true," Aldrich said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "it doesn't matter. You swore an oath of obedience. You broke that oath. The punishment for abandoning one's post is dismissal from the guard, loss of all honors, and possible imprisonment." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, but also something warm and bright that he had never experienced before, the certainty that he had done the right thing, regardless of the consequences. "I understand, sir. Do you?" Aldrich studied his face carefully. "Because I'm going to give you one chance, Thornfield. One chance to save your career and your honor. Admit that you made a mistake. Promise it will never happen again. Agree to additional training in discipline and protocol. Do this, and I'll record the incident as a minor lapse in judgment rather than a court-martial offense." The offer hung in the air between them. Marcus understood what was being asked of him: to deny the most meaningful thing he had done in years, to pretend that helping William had been a mistake rather than the moment when he finally remembered his true purpose. "And if I refuse? Then, you're no longer fit to wear the uniform of the Royal Guard." Marcus looked around the office one last time, at the symbols of rank and authority that had once meant everything to him. Then, he thought of William's face lighting up when he saw his mother, of Anne's tears of gratitude, of the simple dinner that had felt more real than any formal banquet he had ever attended. "Then, I suppose," Marcus said slowly, "I am no longer fit to wear this uniform." Aldrich's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disappointment, and, finally, something that might have been respect, though he tried to hide it. "You're throwing away 15 years of exemplary service for one lost child?" "I'm choosing to serve people instead of just serving protocol," Marcus replied. "If that makes me unfit for the Royal Guard, then, perhaps the Royal Guard needs to examine what it truly stands for." The words were treasonous by the strict definition, but Marcus found he no longer cared. Some truths were worth speaking, even at great personal cost. Aldrich sat back down heavily, suddenly, looking older than his years. "You were a good soldier, Thornfield. Perhaps too good. You followed orders so well that you forgot how to think for yourself. Maybe that was the problem all along." They sat in silence for several minutes, both men contemplating the weight of what was happening. Finally, Aldrich opened a drawer and pulled out several official documents. "I'll need your sword, your badge of rank, and your formal uniform," he said quietly. "You can keep the rest of your personal effects." Marcus unbuckled his ceremonial sword, the weapon that had been presented to him when he achieved the rank of captain. He laid it on the desk along with his badge and insignia, symbols of a life he was choosing to leave behind. "The dismissal will be effective immediately," Aldrich continued. "You'll have 3 days to clear out of the barracks. After that..." He shrugged. "After that, you're on your own." As Marcus prepared to leave, Aldrich called out one last time. "For what it's worth, Thornfield, part of me envies you. It takes courage to choose conscience over comfort. It took me too long to find that courage, sir." Marcus walked through the palace corridors one final time, no longer as Captain Thornfield but simply as Marcus, a man who had finally remembered what truly mattered. Guards he had served with for years stared as he passed, word of his dismissal already spreading through the ranks. Some looked at him with disappointment, others with confusion. But a few, particularly the younger guards, watched with something that looked like admiration. Perhaps the seed of change would grow beyond his own actions. 3 days later, Marcus stood at the gates of the palace with a simple pack containing his few personal possessions. He had nowhere to go, no prospects for employment, and no clear plan for his future. By every practical measure, he had destroyed his life. But, as he turned away from the palace and began walking toward the city, he felt lighter than he had in years. The market district was bustling with its usual activity when he arrived. As he passed through the familiar streets, a voice called out behind him. "Sir Marcus! Sir Marcus, wait!" He turned to see William running toward him, his wooden horse clutched in one hand and his face bright with excitement. And followed at a more dignified pace, a warm smile on her face. "William told me you might be coming this way," she said when she caught up. "We heard about what happened at the palace." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. News travels fast. In a city this size, everything travels fast, and replied. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" Marcus looked around at the busy market, at the ordinary people going about their daily lives, at the children playing between the stalls while their parents conducted business. For 15 years, he had seen all of this as background noise, irrelevant to his real purpose. Now he saw it as the heart of everything worth protecting. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that maybe the city needs a different kind of guard. Someone who works for the people instead of just for the powerful." William's eyes grew wide with excitement. "You mean like a protector for everyone? Not just the palace?" "Something like that." And studied his face carefully. "It won't be easy. You'll have to build trust, prove yourself to people who might not automatically respect a uniform. And there won't be the security of palace employment." "I know," Marcus replied. "But I think I'm ready for that kind of challenge." "Good," she said decisively. "Because as it happens, the Merchants Association has been discussing the need for additional security during market days. Someone with your training and experience could be very valuable to them." As they talked about possibilities and plans, Marcus felt something he had never experienced before, the sense that his life was truly beginning rather than simply continuing along a predetermined path. The uniform was gone, the rank was stripped away, but, for the first time, he felt like he was exactly who he was meant to be. William tugged at his sleeve. "Sir Marcus? Will you still be my friend? Even though you're not a palace guard anymore?" Marcus knelt down to the boy's level, just as he had in the church when they found Anne. "William, I think being your friend is one of the most important jobs I've ever had." That evening, Marcus sat in his small rented room above the bakery, looking out at the city streets below. Somewhere in the distance, the palace bells chimed the hour, marking time as they had throughout his years of service. But, now, instead of feeling summoned by their call, he felt free to choose his own response. Tomorrow, he would begin building a new life, one dedicated to serving people rather than institutions, to protecting the vulnerable rather than just the powerful. It would be difficult, uncertain, and, sometimes thankless work. But, as he thought of William's grateful smile and Anne's words of encouragement, Marcus knew he had finally found his true calling. Some rules were meant to be broken when they stood between a protector and the people who needed protection most. The wooden horse sat on his windowsill, a gift from William and a reminder that the smallest acts of courage could change everything. Outside, the city settled into sleep, and Marcus Thornfield, former captain, current friend, and future guardian, began planning how to build a world where no child would ever have to cry alone in the darkness again.